Welcome to the Three Phase Podcast. My name is Joe Laloon, and today's guest is the one and only superfan, also known as Cameron Hughes. He is the official King of Cheer with his new book and audiobook available right now. We're going to dive into the concept of spreading joy, something that he has mastered in showing up at games in the NHL, in the NFL, in the world of tennis, in the world of rugby, and beyond. He has brought so much joy to so many fans in the sporting world, and his new book outlines all of that in such great detail. It was a joy to listen to. It felt like I was right there with him having conversations at a dinner party, and I think if you get the opportunity to listen to or read the book, you will enjoy it as well. This episode is brought to you by threephasefitness.ca for all of your health, wellness, and training needs. Take a deep dive on the website and see everything that we have available there for you, from in-person training to self-directed programs, blogs, newsletters, and videos that are going to help you get the most out of your health and wellness. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as Cam and I did recording it. And without further ado, let's dive in.
The Three Phase Podcast is starting now.
All right, we are live and rolling. Mr. Cameron Hughes, thank you so much for joining the Three Phase Podcast episode today. I just finished the book and I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Let's jump in. What phase are we at now?
We are at phase 1. We will reach phase 3 and take off by the end of this episode.
Let's go. It's good to know where we're going. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it's awesome. And really nice to connect with an alumni. Cam and I both went to Bishop's University at different times, and just chatting before, we kind of made a few connections and connected a few dots. But maybe you can give us a little bit of that backstory of the intro to Melonhead, and so people have a better understanding of where we're kicking off.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, just meeting you and saying hi, it's like you realize how full circle life can be. And I think it's always good to acknowledge it. You know what I mean? Like being grateful for how it connects the dots and how this leads to that. That's a big part of what my book was about. But yeah, I went to Bishop's University from Ottawa. My buddy, my roommate at the time in second year was like, hey, you got to do something to get the crowd going. The crowd's too quiet. So he dared me, and I didn't know what to do. And then one Friday, I was like, oh, I think I got the idea. So I went to the local grocery store, walked in, and I'll never forget, a French-Canadian guy is like, I need the biggest watermelon. He's like, what? Looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, I need a watermelon, massive watermelon for my head. He's like, what? And so I got the watermelon, carved it out, painted my body, put on the cape, made some signs, D in a fence, and Melonhead was born, and it really helped me. I loved the idea of getting crowds going, and it helped me learn how to read a crowd, and it helped me learn how to be in the right state to get a crowd going. All these things that I didn't know as it was happening, what it was teaching me, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It was just happening to me, right? And looking back, I was in the moment, like the first time I did it, I drank, and then I never drank again doing it. And everyone would assume I was hammered doing it. I'm like, no, you got to focus on your Melonhead.
Yeah.
So it kind of, it helped. The way I say it is like, everyone's like, well, how did it all start my career? It's like, it's a series of sparks that led to this big fire. Mm-hmm. Boom.
Yeah, and that environment at Bishop's University is like the perfect incubator for that type of personal growth. I'd mentioned to you that I think in my first Frosh week, you had spoken to the entire incoming class, and it was such like a release valve to just be yourself and kind of find your niche or find your own path and just like really hone in on that, because when you've never seen or heard of someone doing that before, and then all of a sudden you're like, no, I found this thing and I'm all in on it. It was just like this really cool, like opportunity, I guess, to just like do the same thing. It doesn't have to be the same thing. It shouldn't be, but just to find what really matters to you and go all in on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the gift of being able to share that story with Bishops was like pretty funny, because the first year I did it, I kind of gave them a bit of my past to like, wait a minute, well, why are you here? Like they were a little worried. And then I realized, like the student president realized, well, the authenticity of the truth behind what we all want is We want to live our own truth. We want to go and do what we're passionate about, that we have talent in, that we care about. And, I was living example of it. I wasn't a guy that, I always joked that had the Malibu mansion and flew in on my private jet to Sherbrooke but I was the guy out there working it, hustling, you know what I mean? And I think that that's always been a part of my story. It's just like, keep putting yourself out there,
Yeah. And that seemed to be like the thread of the message through the book is like, when the opportunity presents itself, don't, be bashful and hold back, but just like you said, like show up is that common thread through the book.
Yeah. Show up is, it's the first words of my, my tagline. It's like, how many times in our lives where we hesitate, we're like, no, I don't want to go to that cocktail party. I don't want to go to that meeting. I don't want to go to this. And then you go and something happens that, whether it's that moment or that day or 2 weeks later, something as a result of that, kicks in and you're like, oh, I'm so glad I went to that. And I think it's also show up. Like when I get hired by sports teams, like show up, like be present, be next level, like prepared to give everything you have in those 2.5, 3 hours to the organization because they see a value in what you're bringing. So show up, give them everything you have. And, I think at times in my career, I've done that to a fault where I can't walk after because you're so tired, but it's like, at least I showed up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's like, even that is the first good lesson, I think, is just a lot of stuff becomes motion, right? Like they're just going through it. They're just, they're there, but they're not really present and they're not giving it their all. And your job is sort of the extreme version of that. Like if you came up and stood up as 70% cam, well, all of a sudden the phone stops ringing and people maybe aren't, as engaged with you. But it's such a good example of like, no matter what you're doing, if you can just show up and do your, present your best self and do your all in that opportunity in that moment, you get more opportunities that come out of that. And it just gets this higher engagement and, whatever it might be.
Yeah. I mean, that in your fitness world, it's like, you can't every day, like, everyone thinks, oh, am I like this every day where I'm like animated, crazy, full? No, it's like, it's not, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about showing up and being present and at the times that you really need to be, like, I don't think someone who has a regular 9-to-5 job is going to show up every Wednesday going, oh my God, I am so next level. But if you have an important meeting, if you have an important presentation, if you're whatever that might be, you're going to a conference, like, my whole thing is like being super present and in the moment in those situations. And I think that for me, looking back at my 29-year career of, igniting crowds, it's like, I'm proud of that. There's times where I probably haven't shown up the way I should. I was tired. I was sick. I wasn't feeling it. But, those are the times you got to find that inner spark. But I'm proud of that, and I think that's a big reason why I've probably had longevity in this,
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions too. After getting through the book and just seeing what you do on a regular basis, has this become a bit of like an expectation for you that you are just like always on 24/7, or do you have a good sort of balance and group of people that they know what chill cam is like too, and then it's just those spark moments where you like really crank it up and go all in on it?
Well, 2004, 2005, around there, I moved to Los Angeles, and I was still pretty obviously, and I'd been doing my thing for a while and I was always kind of the fun, crazy party guy. But like I got into the room and there's 20 people at the party and you realize like, it's not a contest. Like you don't have to be, you know what I mean? Like it was this great awakening of like, and not every one of those 20 people in LA were entertainers, but they all wanted a piece of the fun and the action. And I realized I didn't have to, like, you're good, man. You don't have to put that expectation on yourself. At the same time, I've become an expert at reading the room, and I've been to a lot of events where it's like, okay, I better do something. And then your friend's holding you back going, not right now. It's not your event. Right.
Yeah, so it's definitely finding that balance. I know one of the stories in the book was about you'd come with too much excitement and a young kid kind of got freaked out by that, and later in life you kind of reconnected and he was not so freaked out by the high energy. That maybe is an example of one of those opportunities where it should have been maybe a little bit more laid back.
Yeah, it really is about reading the room though, like knowing
Hmm.
when to bring it, knowing when to hold back and knowing what to let the audience, so to speak, the room, the audience, right? However you
Yeah.
label it, the crowd,
Yeah.
own it on their own. And I think that's, look, I've run into a lot of people who are good at getting crowds going and have like the energy and the fun.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the biggest things I share with them is like, read the room, like
Yeah.
listen to the crowd. And I used to, one of my early days of getting up and getting going, I was just going because I was like, I got to go now. I got to go now. And it's like, no, you've got to pick your spots.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a big lesson in my life. And I hope, through my book and audiobook that people take that part away too, of like listening to yourself, but through that, listening to the crowd, listening to the audience, listening to your
Hmm.
team, so to speak, right? When, as an athlete, like listening to each other. And it's not something that's, it's a practice, right?
Yeah.
um, but I think it's so valuable.
And something that really only comes with experience. I'm sure, now probably if you look back at any clips of stuff and you're like, I wouldn't have done it right then. That was not necessarily
Yeah.
the best time I could have done that. And now it's, just more and more refined. And you mentioned, in the book too, just about working with production companies and making sure that it's the best setup and placement and all those things in the venues to get the best reaction out of your crowd or your audience or your room, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I mean I think that's the unknown sort of mystery and sexy sauce behind what I do. And I've done events with 75,000 people and with like 400, and it's to
Hmm.
me it's the same thing. It's the same
Right.
thing. When's
Yeah.
the right time to go? When's the right time to hold back? When's the right time to, in a way, walk away? Like you did your thing, like I used to get so excited. I'd do like big events and I could name tons of them. And I'm like, I want to do more. And the producers would be like, no, you're good.
Yeah.
You had them. You did your thing. And I'm like, I
Right.
know they want more. I know they do. I want more. I've got the adrenaline going. Come on, let's do it. And they're like,
Yeah.
no. And then you realize, like, I think sometimes they're completely wrong because, like, when you've got a crowd, like, give it and
Yeah.
then, and other times where they've been so right that I have to
Mhm.
listen to them too.
Yeah.
And that's part of the that's part of the experience and learning curve and the ego, right? And the ego,
Right.
because
Yeah.
adrenaline going and you're like, I can do this. The crowd loves me, loves it, loves we're having so much
Hmm.
fun. And then you're like, okay, well, back off. It's not your
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. It's kind of like if you think about it from an athlete's point of view and, won the game already, the crowd is hyped. You just threw down the biggest dunk of all time. And then 3 minutes later, you're like, I got to do another dunk. You're like, no, you're good. The crowd has gotten everything that they need. They're so hyped. This game is going to end on a high, and you were part of that peak. And just like the George Costanza moment, like you got to leave on a high and back out before overdo it or miss the moment.
I think it's a valuable lesson. I mean, it's all to me too. It's like it's all about listening, right? I mean, it really is.
Hmm.
And listening has so much to do, not to get too like philosophical and deep, but listening also has a lot to do with our ego and our
Yeah.
insecurities. Like if you're not speaking, is everything okay? Are
Yeah.
you not able to contribute? Are you not of value? It's like, no, I'm just listening to get a grasp of what we're, whether it's in a meeting or with your friends or, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's
Hmm.
like, I've learned to listen to crowds. If I had to make a list, Joe, like Joe, if I was doing like a LinkedIn, like I should probably do this. It'd be funny to do like almost a fake resume of like, like me applying for a job. Good listener,
Intangibles.
like sort of like making fun of myself, like really good bad dancer, listens to crowds well. You know what I mean? Twirls t-shirts with extreme velocity.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Those intangibles, right? The list of things that you've just gained over time. And one thing I was going to ask that you mentioned there with the listening and the ego is like, when you move to LA and you're in that environment, more big fish that are around, is it a confidence thing that was able to step in where the ego sort of compensated in the past? When you're in that room to be able to say like, I'm confident that I don't need to sell myself right now. And I can actually just, sit back and chill and enjoy this moment.
I mean, it's kind of like the bullshit roller coaster, if that makes sense.
Sure.
You
Go
you
ahead.
you 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 think you are like I mean, you have to go in with confidence, but you also have to go in with like an awareness of what they want, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to what you think you can give them. And when you're excitable, you're young, you're like, oh my God, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. Well, wait a minute, what do they actually want?
Mm.
Well, I moved to LA to be a host, and so I'd always ask them. I said, well, what do you think makes a good host? And they'd answer, and what do you think I could do to make your show better? As opposed to, I used to go in and be like, oh, I'm crazy, I'm fun, I'm good with people, like, blah blah blah. And I'm like, you got to ask the right questions, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that took some time to realize, like, what value are you providing this company, this organization? Like, I have a call today with a company that wants to hire me for an event, and I don't know if it's the right fit, but I'm going to ask them point blank, what's your expectation doing, like, as a producer of this event? What are you getting at? What do you want to get out of this? How
Mm-hmm.
can I play a part of that? Because the Atlanta Falcons, Joe, are doing this game with or without me, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
If I don't get that audition or that meeting in LA, there's other people.
Yeah.
So I have to somehow make it safe for the person I'm meeting, and the opportunity that I have to make it easy for them to say, yeah, that's the guy. Like, he fits in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And dude, that's a muscle, man. That's a hard, like, especially when I have I get excited, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
can't believe I'm in this room in LA. This is crazy. Oh my God. Like, and then you're
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, breathe. You're meant to be here. What's the value? Be confident and chill out. Don't
Mm-hmm.
want it too much. I used to want it too much, man. Like,
Sure.
that's the truth. I mean, anyone else who, you listen to these podcasts now with actors and performers talking about, like, wanting it too much, and then their managers or agents saying, go away for 2 weeks. Just go
Mm-hmm.
turn it off. And they come back and all these opportunities happen. I believe in all that,
Yeah. 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 Just like the forcing element of it never seems to really work. And I think for you, right from the very beginning of, like, you mentioned to me just before we started recording, was like that things were just coming to you rather than you forcing them. Like, you were just in the moment more than you were trying to, like, create a moment. And, that definitely carries on, but is sort of reinforced with your listening, right? By being able to see, like, how is the crowd reacting? Like, what's that guy doing over there? And being able to like let these things come to you to kind of build this bigger picture or moment. I think too, what's also super interesting is just you have almost become like an extension of the organization that you're working with, right? So like when you're in Vegas, instead of being like the Vegas Knights and Cam, it's like the Vegas Knights with Cam, and you guys seem to be working really well, like together, or as you're an extension of them to provide as much to that group as possible. And whether it's like a 70,000 people or, like you said, 400 people, you're probably doing a lot of that too, just being an extension of that organization.
Oh, I mean, I think it's really well said. For that night, for that event, for that speaking gig, whatever it is, you are, yeah, you're an extension of it. But you're trying to represent the best of what they do, right? In that
Mm-hmm.
moment, like at a Vegas game, at a corporate speech, at a whatever it might be, it's like, how can you add, I kind of bring it back, and I'll bring it back nonstop. How can you add value that they're looking for? Like,
Mm-hmm.
not just make it about what I think I can do. It's like, and I used to do that with, like, corporate speaking events. I'd always be like, well, this is what I do. This is what I do. I'm like, wait a minute. What do you need? What do you
Yeah.
need? I mean, as a trainer, like, and someone who's doing fitness and health, you walk in, and Mary might be like 20 pounds overweight in this, but what does she need? Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
she needs to lose weight, but what, like, we get so excited thinking we know what Mary needs, but we'll ask, like, I'm sure you go through, right? Don't you?
Do
Like,
a proper intake and consultation. It's got to go. Should be universal across the board. Otherwise, all I'm doing in that scenario is projecting my ideas, and she might not care about the weight at all. Maybe she's in a lot of pain and she's trying to get out of that and manage it. Just like, if you're speaking at a corporate event and, you come in with NFL energy, maybe that's not the right fit.
yeah, maybe sprinkle some NFL, but then bring it back to, what the theme of the event, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, commitment, or, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so Yeah, I mean, look, and it's like, dude, it's a never ending life muscle. Like,
Yeah.
we keep working it, and I think the muscle for me that's really strong is the ability to get on front of on a stage in the crowd, and it's more about the muscle of the business side of it, right?
Hmm. Do you find if you take breaks from or the seasons are shifting or anything like that that it's like a little bit rusty getting back into it, or are you pretty consistent like year round at this point and bouncing around to all kinds of different events that it's just a constant lifestyle flex at this point?
Well, yeah, I mean the lifestyle flex gets exhausting, and so like
Yeah.
I'm gonna take the next probably 3 or 4 weeks like completely off from doing actual any gigs and focus on the big picture stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I think it's like back in the day, I don't know what side of my ego it was, but it was always like, it's the next gig. Okay. Like
Yeah.
someone asked you at the coffee shop, what do you got next? Someone asked me yesterday, what's your next gig? And I couldn't answer it right away. And I did,
Yeah.
but it wasn't this week. And back in the day, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm not worth enough. Oh my God, I got to go get another gig. No, you
Right.
don't.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
you don't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Is that a bit of an LA thing too, where everyone is always sort of looking for work and it kind of gets tied into that, conversation that's ongoing on a regular basis? Like, what are you doing now? What's the next thing?
well, in the early days it was because I'd go to LA and then I'd come back home. I'm from Ottawa and I'd be like, oh shit, what can I tell people I'm doing? Oh my God, am I worthy of it? And you tell
Right.
people and then 2 seconds later, they don't even care. You know what I mean? Just being true to yourself is all that matters in that moment of me. If you said, what's your next gig? And my next gig is like, I don't know when it is, but I could tell you. And it's like, oh, okay, well, are you going to think of me different? No, that's
Yeah.
just, you're not. Right. And you can't have so much attachment to that. And look, there's a part of me that's like, that's just completely BS because you go and do a gig like I just did Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. And building up to it, I had insane energy and focus, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to be giving everything I have. And then you give everything you have, and then you come down, and then you're like, oh, I could use another high like that. That was pretty
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
But you've got to balance that and prep for that in life,
And especially since it's like those extremes all the time for you. But I was going to ask, like, just in terms of, personality types and things, you mentioned too that you had sort of a late diagnosis of ADHD. But when I, see what you're doing, it seems to be like you've sort of tapped into more of a superpower than a hindrance. And for a lot of people who have those types of diagnoses, they sort of get handcuffed by that, and it keeps them from doing things that they really want to do. But for you, like, it's just almost been like jet fuel, so that when you're, in those crowds or you're looking for the next thing or, whatever it is, it seems to be more so like that superpower. Is it like that, or is it more of a, just a perception?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big, deep, thoughtful question because at the end of the day, like going into like let's say an NHL game for the Minnesota Wild, like Winnipeg Jets, whatever team it is, I am so like leading up to that event, I am so dialed in,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so in the zone. And then when that clicks, when that first hit happens, like I wouldn't call it anxiety, but it's like the nervous energy, the nerves. It's like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't get nervous. I get nerves. If you don't get nerves before you perform in front of 10,000 people,
Yeah.
shouldn't even be there. Right. But it's this insane focus that I have for those 2-3 hours that people like, I'll see friends in the crowd at some of these events are like, dude, you were so possessed. And I was like, I was focused. I was
Yeah.
focused. I
Mm-hmm.
was present. I was focused. I was making sure that little kid over there and that woman there twirled the shirt and this did this. And I'll be like, I'll tell my helper, stage manager, Joe, it's pretty funny. I'm like, before the show, I'm always like, just so you know, I get a little intense. Okay. Mary or Susie or whoever's helping me out, they follow me. And they realize that my intensity comes from wanting to give so much to the crowd.
Yeah.
And it matters. The production matters. The music cues matter. All that matters because this team's paying me well to come in, or organization. So let's
Mm-hmm.
make it work. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer your question about the superpower, yeah, like I was full disclosure, like 44, 45, met a top psychiatrist and said, hey, here, try these meds. And 6 months later, I'm like, I'm never doing meds for this shit. I'm going to just be who I am. And if I'm a bit scattered and I forget to do things, or if I'm not as focused during different times, I'll live with it. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to let it stunt my creativity and my ability to connect with people and bring laughs, smiles, and cheer, which is my thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah. And it's just such a cool thing to be able to have found, or just like let it find you, maybe is a better way to think about it, is like, and paid attention to those early moments, like in high school and then at Bishop's, where it was like, okay, I'm good at this thing. I like doing it. It gives me this like feedback that I really enjoy. And then eventually circling back to it, of course, there's stuff in between till you got to the point you're at now. But I think and not just people with ADHD, just all people in general, like it feels like a rare opportunity when people can actually, where they do that, they find the thing that's really interesting to them that they're good at, and they buy into it. And it's kind of like, a bit of, people end up in a trap sort of thing and not necessarily doing all the things that they want to do. But like, man, just by the end of you're reading your book, I was like, I personally feel like I'm doing that, but it's just like, it's such a great inspiration for other people who are going to read that and go like, let me just check in with myself for a sec. Like, do I align with what I'm trying to do? And does this really fulfill me the way Cam's story fulfills him? Because that seems pretty cool. And it seems like he's sort of enjoying most or all the moments of it. And maybe I should start thinking about finding something that aligns better for me too.
well, yeah. So how did that? You listened to the book, right? You listened to the audiobook?
Yep. Yeah, just finished it.
So what was your takeaway? I mean, did you feel like, I'll flip the question on you because you listened to it. Like, do you feel that you're in an industry you're passionate about, that you're become better at every day because you're working in that muscle, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what inspired you to what kind of action do you want to take? I guess that's a good question. Do you know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. No, it's like from the beginning of the book, like I messaged you when I'd gone for a run, and then, I'm in the car, and then I'm, working out, and I've just got it in my ear basically for.
You should have taken a picture of every time, dude, you were listening to it. The car, the walk, run, and this. This is how
I just kept flipping it back on because I was so bought into it. I was like, this is such an interesting, cool story, and it's unique, but I feel connected to all these different points, right from the beginning of like, what stood out to you in the early days that was like really important, how your like family bought into it and really gave you sort of like the motivation to do, or the support to do the things that you wanted to do. And then, just an amazing story about your mom and how she like really encouraged you to be yourself. And, I felt connected to that too. Like my parents have always been, really supportive of me. And then, just getting more and more engaged and working through those hard trials, because everybody has those and they're trying to figure it out, and the road is bumpy a lot. And so just be able to hear your story and your version of that, doing something that's quite unique. I found connection with that too, and was like, yeah, things have been really hard, but when you just keep showing up and putting in the work and being consistent and staying true to yourself, it rolls into more and more fulfillment. And personally, for me, I think like I've kind of rode that path too, where it was like I was doing other stuff, it wasn't super fulfilling, and then I kind of went back to sport, which I'd always been involved in. And when I had the opportunity to start working with other people and sort of giving back to them in ways that I'd been given to, through coaches and trainers, it was really fulfilling for me. Which again, like for you to be able to give to the crowd, even though you weren't the athlete that you wanted to be, on the basketball team or whatever it is, you found a way that you could give back to that crowd and get everyone engaged with the passion that you have.
Give back to the crowd. Give back to the crowd. Good statement, man. So let me ask you this: like, what was the point where you were like, and I don't know your story in detail, but like where you're like, want to be in fitness and want to be in coaching and want to be in health, where you're like, I'm going to go out and do this. I'm on my own, and I'm going to go and create this. Because like that to me that's the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, you did this. You were an athlete, and you maybe worked did you work at a gym or a fitness center?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then boom, and then you created your own path. Like, where was
Hmm.
that moment, or where was that switch? How did that turn on for you?
I think actually it was still at when I was at school at Bishop's, and I had a couple teammates who needed help getting in better shape, and a coach had approached me and said, will you help these guys stay accountable and get them to the gym and go and walk to the gym with them and take them through some workouts and just try to get them in better shape. And it happened to be, the year before, or the off season before we went on and won nationals. And that impact of like, okay, these guys are playing more minutes, they're not injured, they're performing better, we're gelled better as like a group and as a team. Just that impact of like, I wasn't a trainer at that point. I just was keeping them accountable and making sure they showed up. Theme here. And when I left school and was doing some other event coordinating and stuff like that, and I did the Pan Am Games as a producer in Toronto when they were there, and it was all cool stuff, and I was like interested in it, but it it didn't didn't grab me sort of at like a soul level. And then my wife now suggested that I look into personal training, and it was within the first couple weeks, I think, of being hired and started training people and started working with people and seeing like this sort of accountability level of coaching had this great impact for all these people. And that was like before having like skills of teaching movement patterns better and coaching nutrition and doing all that kind of stuff. It was literally just like, just be there for that person and be supportive, and it's going to have a big outcome for them. As soon as I saw that, I was like, all right, this is like, I'm done trying to chase this other thing over here. It's not really the right fit anyway. Let me just go all in on this and do whatever I have to do to be my best version of this. And so for me, for that, it was like, go back into specific education, surround myself with really high level performers, spend a lot of time with my like leaders and management so that I could, take in as much value as possible. And then jump on opportunities. If it was like an opportunity to coach someone that was more challenging, or an opportunity to speak in front of a crowd, or an opportunity to move into management, I jumped at all those because I just wanted to build sort of like the best package that would keep expanding, that, would provide the most value possible.
Well, that foundation. So it's so awesome to hear you say that, like, that moment at university when you've been asked to do something. So the coach empowered you to go empower others, and through that you all became a better team and better teammates, and like, that's so powerful. Like,
yeah.
By the way, it wasn't in a sociology or a science class that those moments happen. It's true. It's like, maybe you're interested in science, which you are through what you do, but like, it's so interesting if we ask other people, like, well, what was the moment where you decided you want to get into this or that? Like, and that's why it all adds up. And I think that we when I'm listening to you say this, is like, you tried a lot of stuff, you built it up, but you also, like, I talk about it a lot, like trusting the process. Like, is this going to lead to that? Did this lead to that? Did this, and look where you are now, right? Like,
yeah.
And to acknowledge that is important, right?
Yeah. And it really just started with that opportunity of like, it was presented to me. I didn't go seek it. It came to me, and I was just open and willing to be like, yeah, 100%. I'll help these guys out. That's not, out of my character to try to elevate everybody else around me. And then, it was just like you said early on, is like, it was just a little spark. Like, it didn't lead to anything directly. It was just like, a little puzzle piece that was placed there early. And then, went off and found some corners and edges. And then, you slowly but surely have, added more pieces to that puzzle. But I think that's what it starts with. And like, same for your story. It's like the Melonhead or the high school of your mom sort of challenging you to step up to that opportunity and say, like, find a different way. Yeah, you're not going to dribble the ball, but how else can you help out? How else can you contribute?
Yeah, it's fun to look back at it too. I find, like, especially now, like, after having written a book, and why I wrote the book. I mean, I wrote the book to inspire stories, like kind of what you just said, of like acknowledging through my story, your story, right? Because I think everyone has a book in them within reason. I'm not necessarily saying everyone has a book in them that people would want to read. But, but I mean, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, hearing that story from you of that moment is like, that got me. That's like not everyone, but a lot of people probably have that. And you're like, well, what
Hmm.
was it? What was the moment where you wanted to go and, I don't know what, study abroad, be a trainer, be in marketing?
Hmm.
So I think looking back, like we put so much pressure on ourselves, right? And society does, of like what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to do it. And it's like, well, wait a minute, trust the process, build the foundation. Like, even like, look, as a trainer, as someone who helps athletes and people get healthier, like it ain't happening overnight, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Yeah, it's got to be you're involved, engaged, present in the process, and you got to be patient enough that that if you do stick with it, the result will sort of come out of it. I've read this quote the other day that it was like, keep showing up and stay consistent. Consistency will always override motivation. So if you're relying on motivation to get a result, you're much less likely that if you just remain consistent, stick to the process, motivation will always come back or come in and out. But ultimately, if you take that path, the result is more likely to happen than if you only ever rely on motivation.
Yeah, consistency is my kryptonite.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Many people's kryptonite, right? I mean,
for sure.
my lifestyle is like, it's so inconsistent. So how do you find consistency? That's truly
Yeah,
my biggest challenge, is being consistent. Like,
yeah.
you go and crush it on the road for 3 weeks and you come back and the last thing you want to do is go to the gym for a couple of days.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then you eat unhealthy, or you do this and you fall off a bit and you're like, wait a minute. You don't have to be perfect, but you got to be consistent.
Yeah, yeah,
I think there's
exactly.
a big difference there too, right? Don't you?
For sure, yeah. If you're like, I play it to the percentages. It's like if you're always trying to be 100%, you're going to be there, not very often. But if you can be, maybe your best is 20%, or the most consistent you can be is 20%. That is better than zero, right? And then maybe over time, as you get more practice at it, the 20% becomes 40%, and that new bar is set. And then you can build off that really slowly. But I think a lot of people jump into fitness and maybe careers as well, and they try to just be 100% right off the bat. But like you've mentioned a few times, like it is a muscle that has to be developed, and it takes time. And maybe your sort of standard for where you want to be is 100, but currently 20% is what you can do and what you can manage, and you're way
Well,
better off just showing up at 20% and working on building it over time.
well, that's even what this guy that owns the gym near me says. He goes, when you come back from your road trips, just come in.
Yeah.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
care if you ride the bike for 30 minutes, or he's like, just get in here. And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a great example of like, it's true, because you're tired and like lethargic. It's like, well, just go do something, right? And I think that all those things add up to helping you achieve your goals. But for me in my career, it was always like it's about putting yourself out there for me, and like always like, okay, you wrote a book, now you got to market it. You did an audiobook, got to put yourself out there. You want to go do more events, you got to put yourself out there. It's like, you know what I mean?
constant hamster wheel.
It is. I mean, and it's like, it's not just me. It's not just me. It's everyone. Like
Mm-hmm.
in our business, if you're a solo entrepreneur, if you're an entertainer, if you're an actor, we've chosen this path to where we have to put ourselves out there, and we're
Mm-hmm.
going to face a shit ton of rejection. Which I probably, even in the book. Do you think I talked enough about the rejection? By the way,
Yeah, we got it. We got it.
okay, you got it. Okay, good. That's a good answer.
But it's
Yeah, we got it. No, yeah, we get it. You're good. A lot of people said no to you. Um, but it's like, and then I used to take that. I used to take it so personally. I'm like, what are you
mm-hmm.
talking about? You're not going to have me. Are you ridiculous? And now it's like, your worth, your value. So you
Mm-hmm.
place your value in your work, and if they don't want you, okay, next.
One of the stories that stood out to me was the one of you going to London, and they had rejected you before you even showed up.
Dude, that story is so crazy. Like, it's so crazy what happened there.
That's the I have a boyfriend of rejections.
Yeah. I was supposed to, I mean, for the listeners, I was supposed to perform at a big hockey championship, and they promoted me before I was coming. And all the fans are like, well, why do we need this guy? We don't need him. And they
Mm-hmm.
felt insulted, and their mascots were going. And this whole barrage of like insane reaction. It was like, we haven't even met. And they're like, they're going to throw me down the stairs. We're going to, like all this stuff. And I didn't end up showing up.
Yeah.
And it was a great example of don't tell me how funny you are. Just show me how funny you are. Don't tell me how great you are as a trainer. Show me how
Yeah.
the perception that we create for what we're offering. That's why I don't promote myself when I go to sporting events. I just show up. Like, why are we giving the crowd the opportunity to decide? Let them decide on their own.
Right. And it really created such a visceral reaction. I mean, I know in London, I've been to soccer games and stuff there where the crowd is hype. That's part of their culture. They really love like the chants and the cheers and the songs, and that's all part of it. But they didn't even really give you an opportunity to show the result of your spontaneity. Right. Because that's part of it too, is like the crowd is not expecting it. And all of a sudden you jump out of a hazmat suit and the crowd goes bonkers and everyone is on their feet and ready to just go all in on it. Part of it is that spontaneity of it. And like you said, if the crowd knows in advance and then they start telling themselves a story and all of a sudden they, you don't even bother getting on the plane because it's not, they've already sort of turned down the opportunity to have a good time.
They made the decision before you gave them a chance. And I think it's like an interesting point in a lot of our lives of like, as you're putting yourself out there in your business, it's like, you have to have the confidence that, hey, I'm going to help you make significant change in your life to have a better, healthier life. Are you interested? Oh, yeah, sounds great. And then they go to you and you work with them and then you give them more than they thought, but you can't not have that confidence going in. I had that confidence going to the management of that organization saying, your weekend's going to be fun. I'm going to make it more fun. Yeah. And P.S. don't tell anyone I'm coming.
Right. Never again. Never again.
Dude, it's amazing. What are you going to do? Is throw a fan survey out to the Atlanta Falcons fan base? Are you okay if this guy comes and surprises the crowd? What?
You're probably going to get a hard no a lot of the time versus just being there and just doing your thing. And then people love it, and you mentioned a few times, like it takes a bit for the crowd to get into it. They don't know what's going on. The music's going crazy. Is this guy wasted? What's going to happen here? And then it pops and everybody's, having an even better time.
Yeah. Just read the comments and you realize why you don't, it's like, it's like your wife meeting your crazy, cousin Bobby. Don't tell her about Bobby. Let her decide on her own. Right. Right. You know what I mean? Sort of truth to that, right?
For sure. Do people assume a lot of the time that you've been like drinking or like you're sort of out of body in those scenarios? Is that the initial assumption a lot of the time for you? And like, have you had to do some work to overcome that?
No, I haven't. It's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. Well, let me ask this 2-part question. The first part is, yes, people think I'm drunk or on drugs or insane at first, or just like a crazy fan from, the Cleveland Cavaliers game. Oh my God, I can't believe the guy's doing that. And then they, I rip off the shirt and it says Cavs, and then I get away with throwing popcorn on people. And they're like, okay, I think this guy's part of the show. Right. I have had to stay true to that, and the few times I haven't had the results I've wanted, but other things maybe happen, that I look back and laugh at now. But in the moment, you've got to stay true to that. Like, that's how I felt the first time I got up at an Ottawa Senators game, where I just wanted to make people have a bit more fun, have a bit more laughs, and energize the room. And if I stick to that core belief, those belief systems of like, that's what I'm doing, it works. Yeah. The times where I'm like, look in section 105, it's Cameron Hughes. He's going to be so funny. It's like, that's happened, by the way. It's the worst. So you got to be true to yourself.
After you jump up like that and you've, maybe one of your better performances, what's the energy shift like in the building? Can you put a number on it? Can you put sort of like an atmosphere change to it?
That'd be really funny is to have like on my website, like, are you looking for it? It's like on an atmosphere button and it's like, it's like 15%
DB increase.
Yeah. Atmosphere, merchandise sales, drink sales. But I mean, it's funny. I believe there's a massive shift, to be fair. I mean, there's a permission. To me, it's a permission. Yeah. Like, I did a Bombers game recently, and the fans were going to have fun on that Friday night with or without me. I'm well aware of that. But we got into it a little more. We gave ourselves permission to act a little crazier, a little louder. We set up some big hits that it was like, okay, I know this because the fans told me as I left, that was extra fun. They didn't say extra, those words.
They made a point to tell you.
But you created something extra special. That's fair to say, right?
Yeah.
Through your energy. And it's always like, well, and back in the day, dude, teams would be like, sports teams would be like, well, is he going to sell me more tickets?
Yeah.
Well, I said to the Bombers, they're like, should we promote you? I'm like, no. There's 32,000 people that fit in that stadium. You're going to have 31. Yeah. I'm not going to sell you an extra ticket. So why give it away? Right?
Yeah.
So the value is creating the energy, the buzz, the moments. And, now with metrics and social media and surveys, you can quantify why you should pay me to come, And that sports executive who's like, oh, well, I don't know, pretty expensive for one guy. And then you're like, okay, well, I used to work for teams that weren't very good.
Yeah.
So if your product's not great, you better entertain your crowd with something, whether it's me or juggling monkey,
And now you've seen those metrics kind of show up in terms of like people being able to find you, people getting you to the venues, people recognizing you maybe a bit sooner when you get up out of your seat, and they get more involved faster. And you do talk a little bit about that too, just like the impact of sort of the social media impressions and things like that. And that's a cool way to see how technology doesn't impact, but reflects a very personal moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really funny, I would love to truly show, I know it's going to sound crazy, but I'd love to be in a room with a psychiatrist, a sociologist, a social behavior expert, like a bunch of people, and be in a glass room listening to them talk about 3 of my videos and why people react, why people don't react, what the outcome is. And I don't actually have to do that. I just have to go read the comments.
Yeah.
But
you just have to listen.
Yeah, you listen and learn. You look at it and you go, at the end of the day, 98% of them are positive. I think that teams now sort of are catching on that if you bring me in and I post this on Instagram or Facebook, that there's it lives on. My biggest video of all time has 42 million views. Biggest video of all time, like collectively, has 80 million views of me performing with a young boy at the Canada Sevens rugby, and he got up and started to dance, and I got out of the way, and he gets the crowd going. And Malcolm, it's 5 years ago, he's 18 at the time.
Yeah, just watch this.
Yeah, he has Down syndrome, and he's a really good friend of mine now, and he gets hired every year to come back. Why? Because he created a feeling, an emotion, made you feel something, made you smile. That's what I do. That's my thing, right? Back to your point, though, is if you can make that live on, and the teams recognize that, and I'll be the first to admit, like, the teams don't play along as much as I think they should.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I do this for other teams, and they're like, oh, well, he's going to be in Minnesota next week. We can't post him in Vegas or Colorado. Who cares?
Right.
Yeah. The gig's up. I've told people for a long time I do this for other teams. I'm not, look at this, like me on a cover of a magazine wearing 12 different jerseys. I've never pretended. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so funny. So I think that brings us to like a really funny story and a mutual friend. And I wasn't expecting the shout out in the book, but I thought it was so funny. You broke a 44-year-old man's heart, and you said you never thought you'd expect to do that in this lifetime, at least. But one of those early days of you went from one venue and you gave it your all at a Maple Leafs game. And that was just the super fan moment when you were, Cam, the unknown super fan. And then a few nights later, he was over in Montreal watching Toronto play and saw you there again, but now wearing a Habs jersey. And for anyone who's not Canadian, those are long-term rivals all the way back to the original 6. And so he had stopped you in the airport and said, you broke his heart. which is a funny conversation starter, from a 44-year-old man. But when you know the man, that's how he would start a conversation. So such a funny idea. It's such a funny concept of like, oh, you're not only a fan of the Leafs, but you're also a fan of the Habs, or even more so, you're just a fan of the crowd, right? You're just trying to, present joy and an opportunity for people to let go and open up and, just be themselves and have some fun.
Yeah, that moment just taught me so much and led to so much amazingness in my life. Like, and I realized looking back at this stage of my career, 20 plus years later, after I ran into Bruce, a media guy said, he did an article on me, and his biggest takeaway that I took was like, what Cam's doing isn't necessarily cheering on the teams. He's cheering on you to let go, to cheer on your team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The guy said it way more clever than I did.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's stuck with me because he's right. Like, I have 300 jerseys in my collection, but like when I went to that, I don't know, Cavs game or Team Canada, or all the jerseys I have, I'm just going to get you sparked up to be energetic, to cheer on your team. And, that moment of Bruce saying hi led to, his daughter, Allie, going to Bishop's, and Allie's two brothers, Adam and Hayden, and then incredible friendship. And now it's so many full circle moments of friendships. And, it's funny how I look back in my career, and it is the friendships. It is the people you meet at the airport who say hi. It is those things that some of them will lead to nothing. Oh, that was great. You met them, and others will like change your life. Like that moment of a gentleman saying hi to you at the airport, and we've become family. It's crazy. Like, and putting my book together was like about that. It was about the people who I've met and who I still friends with, executives who hired me for years, and now they don't hire me, but we're still friends and fans. And so that's, to me, the magic that I've been lucky to be part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm sure every time you run into someone like Malcolm or Bruce or, anybody else you've met along the way, I'm sure their reaction is pretty positive. And that's kind of what sparked, me wanting to reach out to you and have a conversation, was kind of this idea of like spreading joy authentically through yourself. And I think, like, I'll assume for you that you probably have mostly positive interactions. And I think for a lot of people who have been at the games that you've been involved with, or anytime those games come up, they're going to talk about how fun it was and just, how that moment was accelerated by being able to get up and be free. But maybe let's just speak a little bit about sort of like the impact of spreading joy.
Yeah, it's you look at the comments when people make, and at the end of the day, it's like the biggest thing is about, to me, it's maybe not the word joy, but it's that feeling of connectedness, of laughter and smiling and energy, and that's joy, right? I mean, that's when you feel something, when you come alive, right? When you come alive, it's not just, oh, you're happy at the game. No, you came alive at the game. You experienced something as a group, and to be able to, it's who I am. It's the way I was brought up. It's the way my family celebrated me dancing to Phil Collins around the dining room table as a kid with no talent, made me want to spread joy. And it's like, I go to the coffee shop, and more often than not, I'll make sure the young woman or guy behind the counter and the team of people there are, have a little joy. I rent a car. I'm going to make this experience the best of your day. If you give me an upgrade, great. If you don't, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I think that the concept of joy is, we've been blocked for a while, and before the pandemic, of like truly ultimately here's what I think: expressing yourself, right? As a man, as it's okay. Right? It's okay. It's okay to share your feelings and your thoughts, and it's okay to react to them. It's okay to react like a lunatic at an NBA basketball game and go nuts and high five strangers. But then you leave and you're like, well, I don't want to talk about my feelings. I don't want to be like express myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's why that joy is so important, because I think it opens us up. It's
a bit of a gateway to maybe tapping into your truer self.
It is creating that emotion in yourself, and that real emotion. Like, that's why like sports is a great outlet, but to take that and to take that into your real life is like, if you're able to tap into that, I think is powerful. And I mean, I don't think you've ever had a conversation with a male friend where it got real and you were ever like, oh, that was awkward. I can't believe we had that. You leave probably refreshed going,
Yeah.
hey, I'm really glad we were able to truly connect and be ourselves. And you told me how you felt. And it just builds stronger muscles, stronger connections, stronger self.
Mhm.
Right? So,
Yeah, those are like those really deep, important friendships too, where it's like you do have someone who you can reach out to and talk to, and you obviously have fun together too. But when it matters, and you have to have those maybe deeper conversations or express something specific, that you have that support in place. And like I said, if you have sort of the gateway of fun and joy, and you're honest and open with each other, you also have the opportunity to be open and speak honestly as well.
yeah, it's huge. And, I can share this story. And um, I'm at a game, minor league hockey game in Bakersfield. I'm doing a book signing. It's about a year and a bit ago. I get a letter from this guy. He says, "Hey, my parents couldn't be here. They wish you could be here. They could be here at your book signing. They read your book." And guy gives me a letter. So I read it during the second intermission. Because I'm really vain, I ended up filming it, and I hadn't opened it yet, and I filmed it and put it on camera.
Mm-hmm.
And the letter was like basically saying, "We've really enjoyed you over the years. We're really proud of what you've done. And next time you go to the cemetery," and I'm reading this on camera, right? Alone while performing. "Next time you go to the cemetery, tell your mom and dad they did a great job and raised one heck of a son." And I'm like in my locker room, performing mid-game, crying and emotional. But that to me, dude, that's life. That's the energy of life, that they sat on their kitchen table and took 10 minutes out of their day, wrote it down, put it on a piece of paper, gave it to their son, gave it to me. I posted that. And people were like, a 50-year-old male being that emotional and real? It's like, what have you got to lose? Like, feel it, share it.
Yeah,
right?
that vulnerability goes a long way, and just speaks to like your personality and your character, and it just goes, it also makes a better connection with the people who are observing you, which is important too in anyone's line of work, but in your line of work too, to be able to see like there is depth to this. He's not like the fun, crazy guy all the time. There's depth to this, and you have to be able to find how you balance both ends of those things.
Yeah, I do have a heart, Joe.
That's yeah. You're not always wearing a red nose.
No, that's true.
No.
Cheer you give is the cheer you get. That's it. That's my thing.
Right.
The cheer you give is the cheer you get.
Yeah. And I feel like when I finished the book and wrapped up the audiobook, I love that you read it too. And it wasn't just, someone else's voice, because, the moments that were funny, you laughed, the moments that were sad, you could hear. And by the end of the book, like I felt like I had been to a game, or like we just had a really, exciting evening, and you were telling me all these great stories. And that's why I was so sort of engaged and excited about it, is that by the end I was like, wow, that was such a cool story, and like such a journey to go along with you. And then for you to actually be telling the story, it was sort of like we just sat down to a dinner party and you were just recalling all these, events and hard times and good times and everything else in between.
If you could re-record that for my testimonial, because that, my friend, when I sat down to write this book 4.5 years ago, whatever it was, that was the goal. I'm on a plane. I tell you about the Phillips story, or the Belfast story, or the Hollywood story. That was the goal. Be having a beer or coffee on a plane at a cocktail party, sharing those stories. So thank you for bringing that sort of theme together, because that was the goal. So I'm glad that resonated.
Accomplished, came through for sure. And I loved in the second half of the book where you really just dove in on these stories, because I mean they're all mostly funny and just entertaining and would sort of light up a dinner party for sure. But it was really cool to hear all the different aspects of it. But for one is like all these different types of events, from Just for Laughs to the Vegas Rodeo to Condor hockey games to NBA games to sporting events in Europe. Like it was just so cool to see like the reach of this one aspect, or like one thing that has gone so far and sort of snowballed and connected with so many different people. It was really cool to see it. Just like the sort of authentic root of the thing that you do is spread vastly. And one of the things I wanted to ask too is like, just out of some of those stories, and we don't have to give more away. People should read the book and listen to the audiobook and hear the stories,
Yeah, exactly. Like,
directly out of it. But what have been some of the like most memorable moments from your career of doing this?
Well, I mean, top 5 U.S. Open tennis,
Yeah.
performing at the Olympics in Vancouver, like actually being paid to be there, not getting kicked out. That's another story. Read the book.
Read the book.
Performing in Europe for the Belfast Giants, and like getting a gig in Europe, performing in Asia, Singapore, and then I think being on a float at the NBA Finals after Cleveland won. I was parade. Thank you. I was on a float, and this guy's trying to jump up on the float. Skinny white guy with tattoos, and I pushed him down. I'm like, no fans allowed. And it was Machine Gun Kelly, the singer, rapper, who's got Machine Gun Kelly Day now in Cleveland. I was like, sorry. And, him and I on a float for 3.5 hours, 1.6 million people. I had 2,000 shirts, and I never worked harder in my life at a gig ever. It was amazing, but it was like, woo! Well, yeah, man, it's fun to look back,
How many post games are you icing your shoulder as if you are an MLB pitcher? How many shirts and jerseys you've thrown out? It's such a different type of exertion because you're using your whole body and you're not pacing for the most part. You're just going all in. I mean, you've mentioned, you sweat through the 12 jerseys that you're wearing. You're wearing hundreds of t-shirts and throwing out thousands of t-shirts every night. What's that physical aspect like?
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging because I'm throwing my body around on concrete stadiums and, going up and down stairs, and it's not overly healthy. I've been hospitalized 8 times. And, I've got to be careful at this stage because there's also a lot of variables, people, stairs, but I mean, when you're in it, you're in the moment. It's like the adrenaline is just like, it's amazing. And I kind of have no rules, which I should. But that's what I think fans enjoy is how much I, push that aspect. And there's a way to push it with the safety that I'm kind of working on, to have some more longevity, right?
Definitely. What have some of the like most surprising, maybe like athlete or celebrity interactions that you have with that maybe left you like a little bit, maybe starstruck or sort of surprised about the moment?
The first thing I would think of is the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City, having breakfast. We had an RV that we drove there, and we're having breakfast at a Denny's. And it was the day after Canada lost to Sweden in the opening game. And in walked the Team Canada executives, including Wayne Gretzky and his dad.
Yeah.
And I was completely starstruck. I would run into his dad, Walter, the rest of the series, and many times after that. And he'd always be like, yeah, we've met before, right? He was so nice. And then Gretzky ended up getting me a ticket to the gold medal game, which was pretty funny how the full circle moments happen in life. But yeah, I mean, look, I've been really lucky to meet people behind the scenes, and you meet certain people and, you meet Roger Federer and you're like just blown away by what a gentleman he is and how present he is when he's talking to you. And you take the best of how you interact with people and meet people,
Is there anything on event or location on sort of like a bucket list that you've got that you're trying to achieve or you'd like to do at some point in your career? Not forcing it, but Super Bowl.
Yeah. It's in Vegas, and I know some people in Vegas, so we'll see.
That's awesome. See if that happens, and keep your eyes open for hazmat suits and things like that. Scan the crowd in advance.
Just go.
I think overall, Cam, like the book summarized a lot, and the fact that you were able to read the audiobook, like I said, it really came through just how important all these like spark moments were and how they led to the next thing. But because you were true to yourself and rooted to, the stuff that you had been shown and taught and and then worked on and flexed as a muscle and believed in it, all sort of came together for you. And through tough times and low times, it has led to these really high highs. And I want, anybody who's listening to find a way to read or listen to the book as well. Because
what's it called?
It's called King of Cheer. It is available anywhere you can find a book, and it's on Audible.
Yes.
And you got to get yourself a copy, because it's not just about sport and fandom. It's really about how all those things can impact your day-to-day life with whatever you're doing.
Yeah, man, I just heard you saying that. And the last thing I'll say, unless you have anything else, is like, I heard you say that. And my friend of mine said to me a while ago, I was at their house in LA or Manhattan Beach or something. And I just come back from doing a gig, and she looks at me, and I've known her since high school. She goes, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, you're my only friend I have in the entire world who just won't quit, who just keep persevering and going for it. And I was like, oh, it was like the nicest thing she could. It was so nice. It was nice to acknowledge that, at the end of the day, I think my story and all of our stories as we build them and keep creating them and living them is like, I don't have a quit in me. For some reason, I kept believing. No matter how many times I've been pushed down. So I think that that's a muscle that you keep working on by getting the wins and cheering yourself on and being around a great community, right?
Yeah, and that is what's important, and all you need to be successful and find your truth.
Yeah.
And keep showing up.
Find your truth, keep showing up, and raise a toast.
Always.
Awesome, man.
Cam, thanks so much for joining the podcast. Let the people know where they can find you, follow you, book you.
At Cameron Cheers, CameronHughes.tv. The next time, we should have done this, you should have been training me while we were doing this. You know what I mean? Then,
we could do that.
My shoulders are like, okay, how's that for your t-shirts? Okay, good.
We'll do a live virtual workout, or I'll come to you next time, and we could do one in person and record it.
Dude, I'm going to come to you next time I'm in your hood, because that'll get me going for the game, Next
time you're here for Bombers, Jets, Moose, we're getting a workout in.
I love it. I can't wait.
Okay, Cam, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us today. We'll see you soon.
Cheer. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the episode and got something out of it, please download, share, and leave a 5-star review so it becomes easier for other people to find our podcast and also take in some of this great information from our guests. Today's episode is brought to you by 3phasefitness.ca. We are expanding the website, so please go over there, take a look, and see what we've got for you. Everything from in-person training, remote coaching, self-directed programs, guides, blogs, and newsletters. Head over to 3phasefitness.ca. And until next time, I'm Joe Laloon.